Hi everyone, Sean Zemba here. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And in this training session, we're going to discuss the building blocks of faith. So when I say faith, I don't mean the belief in a particular religious path. It could be faith in yourself. It could be faith in life. It could be faith in someone or the process. It doesn't matter. I'm going to show you how this builds from the ground up. So the idea behind faith begins with wanting to be courageous. In other words, you want to have the will to try something. Because when you try something, that means you haven't done it. There's an uncertainty about it. There's a feeling that perhaps this might not go well. So step one, you want to be courageous in this situation. Step one, you want to progress. You want to investigate. You want to maybe grow through something. You want to maybe take a chance to improve your life. Maybe take a chance and shift your job, or ask that attractive person in your environment for a coffee. So you want to be courageous. That's step one. And as you amplify the rationale for this courage, something cool happens. As you amplify your rationale for courage, as you think, oh, there could be this benefit and that benefit, and by not taking this chance, I'm not deprived of pain. I just have a constant lower threshold, so slow drip of wondering what could have been, of potential unexpressed. And by taking this chance, at least I have an answer, or at least I have a direction to go in. So it begins with wanting to have courage in this situation. And as you amplify your reasons, then you move on to the next step, which is having courage to try something. Having courage to try a workout program, even though many people give up, or maybe even perhaps you've given up in the past. But you want to have the courage, and you have it, that you're going to try something again. Now, once again, we could be confronted with our doubts. Oh, this is impossible. I'm going to fail. It's not going to be worth it. It's going to be a waste of time, energy, and money, and I can't afford that. It's going to feel like there's no hope. If you've been coming from a darker mindset. But courage doesn't mean that there is no fear. It doesn't mean that you are isolated from the possibility of failure or mistake. The idea of trying something it implies the fact that we have not already adapted to that reality, that we don't have enough consistent repetition with it, that it's part of our lives, part of our very being. But courage implies I want to take that step. And so you give it a shot. And maybe it works out, and maybe it doesn't. Now, what you do from there will determine how you grow. What do I mean by that? So, level 2, step 2, you have courage to try something. Now, it either works out or it doesn't. And regardless of which of these happens, the way to progress is either going to be associated with an individual event, or it's going to be associated with yourself. And what I mean is, let's say you apply for a new job and you get it. You had the courage, you took this step, and it worked out. Now, if that's what happens, then you start to make the association that you have more capability in this domain of applying for work, of asking, of taking little chances like that. But if you're honest with yourself, you have areas where you're less comfortable. Perhaps it's public speaking. Perhaps it's expressing your views at the holiday dinner table with your family. Perhaps it's starting a business, starting something fresh. Because yeah, you could join a business that's already established. Could you start something from the ground up? Or maybe you're afraid to expose your body at the beach. You're afraid to wear a swimsuit because you don't want to be judged. This is what happens when the sense of courage becomes associated with a particular thing, a particular avenue. Now, if it doesn't work out, then you just try again, try and be courageous again in another way. Try and figure out what went wrong. Maybe this person or job or opportunity wasn't the right fit. Maybe I didn't go about it a skillful way, and so it wasn't going to work. But the way that I prefer that we try to progress is associating courage to yourself, that you are courageous, instead of I'm courageous in these situations. Do you see the distinction between these two? So when you're courageous in such a way that whether your attempt, whether what you tried worked out or not, when you're courageous in such a way that it becomes a part of your identity, a part of your general conception of yourself, then you have less requirement of being in a specific field, and your sense of capability expands geometrically. Now, beyond courage, again, whether it's linked to a specific thing, such as asking someone out, or beginning a weightlifting program, or starting a new diet, or beginning a book reading regimen because you want to improve your mind and your comprehension of things and your skill set. Let's say that's what you want to do. Perfect. So the next thing, the next step to try happens naturally. You start to develop a sense of trust. So in other words, if you throw something and catch it, you start to have a sense of certainty that, yeah, I could do that again. You start to have a sense of trust that, yeah, that is within my capability. When things work out, automatically there's an aspect of acceptance that is formed. We start to accept and take in that, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I've seen some weird things. That idea is possible. You become more accepting, and you become more trusting in maybe particular situations, like if a person has always been there for you, so you can trust them. Or, even if things went wrong, you've always found a way. So you start to trust yourself. And this is where self-trust begins to build. This is where self-trust begins to fortify itself and becomes a part of who you are. You trust what you are, regardless of what happens. I can find a way, I can make a way. I can be resourceful, I can work through life. Perfect. Good. And as you start to do that, as your sense of self-trust, now this is the level 3 aspect, as your sense of self-trust develops, as that foundation is laid, then eventually you're going to look at life, because when you're looking for a dessert, suddenly You become aware of, oh, I could stop at this restaurant. Oh, this place has good pies. Oh, I see an advertisement for ice cream. Suddenly, when you focus on something, your awareness is expanded. Well, when self-trust is such a hardwired aspect of your experience, that you'll look out at life with this sense of confidence, with this sense of strength, with this sense of certainty that, yeah, I can face that. That's no problem. And eventually, a little shift happens, a switch, a transition, a change occurs. And at that point, you can start to trust life, because the sense of self-trust is so strong in you. When you look out at life, the association begins to switch from being just I can trust myself to life generally works out in the big picture. Yes, there's atrocity. Yes, there's human trafficking. Yes, there's betrayal and violation and government corruption and sickness and lobbyists and many things. And there's thieves and murderers out there. Yes, all that's true. And yes, one day we will all die. But when you look out at life, you begin to see the experience of self-trust that you had becomes enmeshed with the greater patterns and themes of life. And you start to see an unfolding. And yeah, little instances may not work out. Yes, things with people may end up being calamitous. But when we look out at life, there is a tendency to negotiate, climb, and find a way in the same way that you did. And eventually your sense of self-trust becomes a sense of trust, that is non-local. And at that point, as it becomes non-local, this is where we start to say there's something of faith. There's something of, yeah, I do not, you don't need to see evidence that things will work out. Because there's a faith that in the grand scale, everything eventually will. Perhaps not for an isolated event, perhaps not for a person or a group or a species, but the whole of life is improvement, it is progress. And this can be a very hard distinction to make when we're so used to not trusting ourselves. When you do not lay the proper foundation of courage and developing trust and certainty that you can do something or you can learn something or you can find a way, then you will never do, you can't just skip to, oh, I trust everything was going to happen well. When that happens, it's usually built on autosuggestion or being in an environment where you, oh yeah, everything's going to be okay, yeah. Just as the father of the Buddha, historically or mythologically, whichever you prefer, tried to convince his son that there was no death, no sickness, no hardship, tried to keep him penned up his whole life so that all you saw were the healthiest, the strongest, the most vibrant and beautiful and healthy people. By trying to do that and saying, oh yeah, everything's fine, the moment something goes wrong, the moment something deviates from plan, and in your own life, plans never work out 100%. There's always some new thing that you didn't account for. And then that gives you a new distinction to account for it next time. A new idea of, oh, I didn't think of that before, but now I have the wisdom. I have grown on my path. I can incorporate that into my precautions. Because the Buddha's father shielded him, tried to protect him from all the negativity of life. When he finally encountered it, when he finally encountered people who were sick outside of the castle walls, people who were old outside of the castle walls, and a body of a person who had died outside of the castle walls. The stark contrast from what he had lived to that had shaken him to the core, and that caused him to lose the enjoyment of all of those previous pleasures. And he had to find a way that was satisfactory, that would lead people to their own sense of freedom and emancipation from the true trials of life that could not be bought. away. When we condition ourselves through autosuggestion and building beliefs and hypnosis, and this is very powerful. I incorporate these things, I teach these types of things, okay? But there is a deeper, more solid way to do this. When you incorporate it consciously, using autosuggestion and self-hypnosis and regular hypnosis and all of these types of things, that is powerful, it is effective, and when associated and intermixed with the process that I'm laying out for you, it becomes so much more powerful. But when it is entirely self-generated, there are many gaps and the foundation can be shaken. Like if your association for trust and faith is built on a person or relationship, and all of a sudden that person goes to a change in their life, a change in their biochemistry or a shift in their perception, and they no longer want to be with you, or they don't feel fulfilled with you anymore. They don't feel you're a good fit together anymore, or that they become enamored with someone else, or perhaps they die, or develop Alzheimer's or some type of condition where they no longer connect with you at the level that you once did. Then, when all of your sense of trust and faith and hope is built on this person, this relationship, this skill that I've had, this physical attribute that I've developed, my strength, when it is associated with a particular thing, which isn't wrong, which is a good stepping stone, but when it is associated with a particular thing, when that goes away, when that is challenged, people are crushed. For example, I went through the strategic intervention coaching program to learn some of the intervention strategies of Tony Robbins that he uses to help people. And one of the strategies is called expanding the unit. And in this, there are many ways to apply it, but one would be if someone feels like they're giving all that they have, so they have nothing more to give to making a change in their life or improving something or handling a challenge. You expand the unit, you involve other people, maybe a mentor, maybe their partner, maybe members of their family, to lighten the load or give them more emotional support, maybe help fulfill their needs of feeling significant and loved. And when that happens, then the person feels free to tap into greater and deeper resources with which to tackle that problem. This is a powerful thing, and I will not negate it. But in certain times, I have a reluctance on applying this strategy, because when your sense of hope or faith or strength in something is attached to a particular person or a group, if some shift happens, if some occurrence happens, and there's a lot of potential for change in life, we all know that. When that happens, then that will set a person up for a mighty fall. So I have some reluctance on using strategies that will make you trust or require or need a person to handle life or handle situations, but sometimes it's valuable and essential. And then from there, that you can work on building a broader, more self-contained, more non-local experience of trust. So at one point, the idea of faith comes from, again, it's from the roots that of trying. You don't actually know how things are going to work out. You don't know the event by event, the moment by moment changes that are going to occur. You don't know the steps. You don't see the full pathway. You just know where you're heading. You don't realize that there are wolves on that path, that you're going to have to turn and move laterally instead of straight up the hill for quite a way, because the hill is too steep and dangerous, icy, fragile, prone to avalanche. Eventually, you reach that point of faith where your sense of self-trust that you had developed and built up becomes non-local, and you have this sense of faith that life works out. Life happens with you, for you, through you, not to you. And when you just condition yourself to say, life happens for me, there's power in there. And it trains you to focus for how that could happen. And this is essential. But I want people to have the whole pizza. I want people, not just one slice. I want people to have more comprehensive strength. So when that is incorporated with this building yourself from the ground up, from wanting to have courage, to having courage, to starting to have success and a feeling of that you could trust yourself, until that sense of trust can become non-local. As you look out at the world and say, oh yeah, all the stuff that works out with me works out with other people. It's not just me, it's just the flow of life. As long as you align with life and like participate in the way that makes sense, as you align with what happens in reality, you know, paths can be made, opportunities can be found. As long as you're doing that, you'll develop a sense of faith that even though things may seem awful, you've seen the patterns on your brighter days, and or you've survived the darker days, so you know it's possible. At one point, people say faith is the top of the mountain in this progress, and I say, goes far beyond that. It goes beyond that, because the idea of faith implies that something could go wrong. And I'm a person that studies atrocity, war crimes, human trafficking, abuse, hardship, betrayal, violation, murder, injustice. I study these things. I'm not naive to it. But there is a progression on your path as you reach the top of the mountain that looks like it is faith. There's a point where the sky opens up and you realize that there could never have been something wrong, where our disagreements with the way, the Tao, God's will, the universe, Brahma's one consciousness, the Dharma, whatever, the Great Spirit, the laws of physics, if you like. Well, that one, you really need a massive mastery of that. And I don't have the agility to try and piece that one together for you. But beyond, once you reach that point of faith, where you don't need to see in order to believe, when you don't have to see in order to know, when you don't have to see in order to progress, when all the information you have from your senses, when all of your perception is that everything is dark, everything is challenged, nothing will ever be good, life is hopeless, life is despair. And faith carries you on because you don't need to see in order to believe. Beyond that, there is something. Because at the highest points of faith, the idea of faith becomes obsolete. The idea of that you would need something to navigate through is useless. And you can't, if you're not establishing these levels in your life, if you're not establishing this foundation in your life, if you're not building this mountain, this tower, this pyramid of fortified experience, you can't just skip and auto-suggest yourself and say, oh, nothing is wrong, everything's good, because you won't understand the reality of it. You won't have the context of what it really means. You'll just use other words, and without experience, you'll have an inaccurate perception and live a very airy, fairy, dreamy life. Get to the top of that mountain, and I'll show you how to open up to the sky. I hope you've taken great value from this video. And if you have, I encourage you to check out my website, pathofmastery.net. On there, you'll find many free resources. where I share with you a variety of tools and tactics and skills and strategies and ways to develop yourself. And if you want to go further, there are opportunities to connect with me where I can help you build your path, accelerate your evolution, walk the hard, narrow path of mastery. There are many opportunities. So check it out, and I'll see you in the future. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.